good now? Okay, well, welcome to No Chats. Our topic today is ransomware. And as we're experiencing a hardened market, I thought it's a real relevant conversation to speak on. And again, my name is Matthew Lefchik. I'm the director of our risk management for Node International. And now I have a special guest, Greg Bautista, partner at Mullen Coughlin. Now, Greg, if you could do me a favor, enlighten the actual audience here, your background and Mullen.
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks for having me, Matt. It's a pleasure to be here. Mullen Coughlin, we are a very specialized law firm that focuses on data privacy and cybersecurity. It's really the core of our practice. We don't do anything other than cybersecurity issues. And our role is to really help clients go through the process after they've been victimized or are potentially victimized by a cybersecurity incident. Help them navigate the legal ramifications of that, retain under privilege investigators, and make sure that they are complying with the legal obligations that may arise. Everyone's seen the notification letters that get sent out when your credit card is stolen. So those are the types of issues that we deal with. We've got a dedicated team of 70 lawyers that focus only on cybersecurity issues. It's all we do day in, day out. So we've got maybe 3,000 incidents a year or more that we handle. So it's a real wealth of experience, and I don't think you'll find any law firm in the country like us.
No, that's great. We appreciate that we're working with you, partnering with you on this topic. So the agenda today is going to be ransomware, but also talking about the history and the current state, the data theft, third-party risks, and then regulatory ransomware considerations. So let's just dive right into it. Talking about the history versus the current state. Now, ransomware has been a hot topic within the community around IT, insurance, poses a major risk to the companies of all sizes. Now, what are some of the recent trends that you've seen with ransomware threats that we should be looking out for and building more awareness?
That's a great question. I mean, 2020, it was a tough year for a variety of reasons, the pandemic being, probably the biggest. But it was a really difficult year for companies because they were targeted frequently by ransomware threat actors. A lot of this was precipitated by the fact that, very quickly we had to pivot to remote working environments. And a lot of companies didn't have the infrastructure, didn't have the resources, or were trying to stand them up very quickly to allow their employees to continue to work in a safe, pandemic safe environment. But it opened the door for threat actors to exploit those perhaps not as secure internet connections into the network to gain a foothold and deploy ransomware. It's really caused the industry, I'll say quote unquote industry of ransomware to evolve because of the severity of the attacks. In the past, they'd come in, they'd encrypt your data, demand a ransom, and that was the end of the story. Now they're taking time in the environment to delete your backups or encrypt your backups that make it that much harder to recover. They are increasing their demands where we used to see on the high end 6 figures, or the exception would be $1 million demand. Now we're seeing 8-figure demands with some regularity, and the attacks are so much more sophisticated. The attack vectors are being exploited. Like VPN used to be a fairly secure way to connect in. They're finding ways to tunnel in. They're using phishing attacks, social engineering to gain access to credentials, and using that to go in and do their bad acts. The one thing that we didn't think would be as prevalent, but we're seeing it more and more, is looking at people's web histories. They're going to COVID sites and looking up information. They're looking up resources, and the threat actors are embedding malware in there that's allowing things to get taken, credentials that can be scraped and passed back to them. So it's scary because you think you can trust certain websites, you think you can trust certain emails, but without some diligence and some security measures around it, anyone can be victimized, even with the best cybersecurity plan.
No, I think you bring up a lot of great points. Even one of the comments you made earlier is, partner up with a cyber specialist, as you know, Coughlin, Mullen Coughlin, yourself, even carriers, even specialty agencies, so that you can identify this risk and not feel like you're doing it alone. And then really develop a roadmap, based on your client's needs and so on. And as this market is changing, ransomware is about a $20 billion cost in 2021. And it stems really to the point where no one realized where the pandemic was going to happen in early in 2020. But working from home, that adoption of change and looking at remote access and how our employees' infrastructures are being designed, it's a true target of where these particular criminals are really, developing some different campaigns to harvest that data. Like you said, websites, you're probably less shopping, face to face, so you're on more online. And there's an opportunity where they can actually harvest some of that data, your credentials, and then expose you. So what I want to bring up too is, building that more of that awareness, joining these kind of webinars, podcasts, elaborating a little bit further on where that particular journey should be. And then what we do at Node here is, we're asking more precise questions during the application to really understand the state of the security controls and really isolate the email protection, the backup, and the security systems, as you already brought up, as those are the key vectors of where these cyber criminals are attacking. So appreciate that. So let's go into the next topic, and it's data theft. One of the most significant evolutions of ransomware threat actors is to try to pressure companies to pay the ransom, pay the threatening, or the actual release of the stolen data. How does that change the advice you give to your clients, how they evaluate the potential reputational harm?
Yeah, it's really quite nasty now with these some of these ransomware threat groups. We've seen NetWalker, Sotnakibi, Conti, Lockbit, names that had been present in, let's say, the ransomware industry for a number of years, but they started to change their tactics in order to elicit a payment, even when a company is able to recover. You have backups, you were diligent, you stored them offline, but even with that, they're taking not necessarily all your information, but they're taking a great deal of it, and not necessarily with any kind of focus. They may search for things, but you don't know what they have, and that's the biggest concern. So doing data forensics on the environment, trying to understand the attack is so important. But sometimes you don't have that chance, because very quickly they're going to start leaking information. They've got these publicly available dark web leak sites that many security researchers are monitoring. So the second they start leaking information, it's possible that you'll get a call from someone in the media or someone, a security blogger, saying, hey, we just found this on the dark web, and do you have any comment? So you need to be very prepared from an incident response planning perspective to know how to answer that question, so it doesn't come across as though you're being caught off guard. With the publication of information, or the risk of publication, it does change the conversation that we have with clients on a regular basis, because reputation is so important. That goodwill that you have with your customers and with your employees is priceless. And to be able to represent to them that you've taken every possible action to protect them is really important in terms of communicating to them the extent of a potential threat. They're likely going to know that you were impacted by ransomware at some point, because operationally, things go down. Employees aren't going to be able to access things, and you really have to try to control the rumor mill as much as possible before it gets out of control. And you're now, instead of being demonstrating that you're taking control of the situation and handling it appropriately, it looks like you're now on the back foot, and just being responsive. So it's not that we want you to go proactively out with communications, but we need to be careful and very diligent about how we plan the communication process throughout an event and the recovery and restoration. Uh,
Wow.
as far as the payments themselves, that's that really comes down to a business decision. If you are operational, if you're not operational, I think we all prefer not to pay threat actors, to pay terrorists, bad guys. That's not something anyone wants to do. But we understand and we know that law enforcement would not necessarily stand in the way if it was a critical thing, that the data, the database, the server, whatever it is, if it's critical to the life of the ongoing viability of the business, if you have to do it, it's possible, and we can work towards that. But from a reputational standpoint, that ends up being a business decision. If that data gets leaked, how harmful could it possibly be? And again, forensics is so critical in understanding what was taken, so that we can get ahead of that messaging if possible.
Yeah, just to justify. You bring up some other good points, and here at Node, we do breach credentials when we actually go into a quoting phase for our particular clients, different industry sets. And I think there are a lot of them are surprised about what you find on those dark web scrubs. And it's, so again, trying to elaborate a little bit further on some of the awareness, what is out there. And plus, there's a lateral movement from what your corporate network and those passwords and those credentials to your personal as well. But you bring up, hey, how would you be able to mitigate that risk better? Well, again, if you had a better backup, more relevant, you actually introduced an IR plan, you did a business continuity plans and so on. And then I think that really stems towards the overall cyber hygiene, how those particular organizations, doesn't matter if you are, healthcare to a Fortune 500 or you're an SMB, there's a lot of different protocols that these organizations need to really look at. And that's why we bring up, this is, I think, a great plug-in for us from Node. We have an exclusive Cyberman 365. It's a personal standalone product on your digital risk. And really where it's supporting is from your credit monitoring to your social media platforms, to your personal bank accounts, to then even where we differentiate it from even some of the other actual products that are out there, is we're actually scanning your home. Imagine the amount of interconnected devices within your household today. And we're all working from home nowadays. Based on that scenario, we're talking about prior everyone's security controls and layers within a corporate footprint. Do you feel that confident now that we're siloing ourselves and individuals in different groups just because there is a cloud or a different app or antivirus or an endpoint or a dual factor authentication? Do you feel that confident that your risk is minimal? And I would say you'd have to really look in the mirror and make sure you're identifying all risk factors. Okay, let's go third-party risk. And I think that's kind of speaks to a lot of the element of where everyone is today. When we talk about this, are companies in trust with their systems? Are they more secure? Do they feel that way right now because they have more software from a hardware or from an actual software platform perspective?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that a lot of companies you take advantage of and is very helpful are managed service providers or outside IT resources or companies that can host their data. Everything from AWS to some smaller cloud hosting providers. But there are benefits to entrusting your information and your systems to a third party. That being said, not every managed service provider is built the same, and it's really important to do the diligence and make sure that you're not entrusting your the keys to your kingdom, the critical information for your business, to someone that may not have the reputation or the resources or the expertise, and that's something that really needs to be very carefully evaluated. One of the things from a ransomware standpoint we saw quite a bit 2019 and 2020 and going forward is these managed service providers were being attacked directly, and instead of the managed service provider systems being impacted by ransomware, they were using platforms like Screen Connect or ConnectWise, et cetera, to then blast ransomware down to all the customers of that MSP. So even though you were secure, your systems were fine, there was a tunnel in from the MSP, and they just encrypted all the customers' networks, and that was a treasure trove for these threat actors. You hit one MSP, you get 100 plus customers, in some cases thousands. And it becomes not only a big problem for the MSPs, but every single organization that's impacted by it now has to deal with a ransomware incident where they thought they were safe. So it's pretty scary as far as how that that's all set up, because from the MSP's perspective, and nothing against MSPs, I think a lot of them are very capable, but there were very early on some vulnerabilities with the tools that they were using for their services that perhaps they didn't know about, or maybe they didn't patch quickly enough, and those were exploited. So not to say it was anything they did wrong, but it is definitely something that you want to pay attention to, make sure that they're up to date on their patching, up to date with the products that they're using, and they have the appropriate safeguards for access to your systems, like unique passwords, two-factor authentication, things like that. I've seen one MSP use the same password for every single one of their customers, and you pop that password once, now here you are back in the same situation. So pretty interesting, pretty scary stuff. The other area where we see issues are where companies may host information for their customers. So they're providing a service, the database, software as a service, whatever the data is up in the cloud. They get hit. Now again, it's a encryption of all of their customers' information, and that's where you need to make sure, from a hosting standpoint, they're doing the appropriate things to back up their the data they have for you, and it's being done in the right way, and that it's secure. Like I said, we don't envy the position of the companies that get impacted. We have helped some of them work through these issues as well, and it is there's significant risk of liability, there's significant risk of litigation, but to really get out there in front of it and do everything that you can to help the customers is again, that reputational piece, so critical in the response process.
Absolutely. And you bring up some good points too that I want to shed some more light on. And some of the top threats for 2021 we've noticed, again, we're talking about remote workers, limited resources, cyber posture, and how we're actually doing some integrations of the different kind of really the footprint where our teams are. So you could imagine where a cloud jacking misconfiguration, as you just mentioned, could be very susceptible in how these particular partnerships. But when we talk about looking at our own clients, when we're like analyzing their insurance, their actual posture, you truly have to take that process of looking at your third-party risk. And that's another topic I just did one on another webinar about, and the audience asked about the SolarWinds impact. And as many people are learning, and more information is coming out, and how the actual assessments have been all portrayed. There's over thousands of companies exposed, and not only from government to SMB to your Fortune 1000, 2000s that are really being impacted by this. So for a lot of people, I think they're still trying to understand where would SolarWinds and some of these other security, and that's what I brought up, is these other security MSSPs, SaaSes, and so on. They're being targeted for that sole purpose because they are working with those different organizations that have a lot of PII and information for ransom. So great, appreciate that. So let's go into our last topic here. I know we're getting close to some of the time here. Regulatory ransomware considerations. And one of the topics that we're hearing a lot is, are ransom payments illegal? Should companies really refuse to pay? So I think a lot of the audience would love to hear your perspective on that as well.
Yeah, so it's quite an interesting area here with the legality of paying a ransom. Technically, there is no law against paying a ransom generally. There's been guidance at various points in time from law enforcement agencies along the lines of, what I said earlier. Look, if you're down, if it's critical to your business and you need to pay, we understand they're not going to stand in your way. That being said, no one wants to pay a ransom and they don't recommend it. And neither do we. But if you were going to go down that road, and a lot of companies have no choice, there are some considerations to take into account. The Office of Foreign Asset Control recently issued an advisory on the legalities of paying banned or sanctioned parties. They've added organizations that are known threat actors that are tied to terrorist organizations or to nation states. So before you go out and purchase set up a Bitcoin wallet and buy some Bitcoin and look to make a transfer, you have to be careful in making sure that you're working with the expert resources that you're provided under your insurance policy, for example, to go through the process and make sure that all the checks are cleared. You're not seeing things like Dridex in the environment, which would cue you into it being a particular threat actor with ties to a nation state, or it's not a particular type of ransomware that we know is banned, or that the wallet address that you may be funding the payment to isn't on the sanction list. You have to clear all those checks, and also contact law enforcement, contact the FBI, make sure that they're looped in, because that can help mitigate some of the potential risk to you as a company. Unfortunately, with the advisory, it's strict liability for anyone involved in the chain of payment of a ransom. So it's something that we as outside counsel take extremely seriously with our clients. They will ultimately be the targets or potential potentially looked at if a payment is made and it turns out it ended up being a banned threat actor or a banned party. So while it's not illegal, and we would prefer that we don't continue to make ransom payments, there's always a reason that is justified behind making a payment if you do, and if that's the case, there's all of this regulatory guidance that needs to be considered before taking action. So very new-ish development, I guess, as of this year. But we spent a lot of time, looking at it and making sure that we're doing everything we can to protect our clients.
No, and I'm glad, because again, I think when we're looking at our audience can be the key clients, the agencies, the brokers that have these relationships, and us, from really developing more of a cyber hygiene around these particular concerns and risks. And I think this topic is one of them. And understanding that your industry and your severity of these exposures are more prevalent, it's not going to go away it's if anything, it's actually increasing. So some of the things that I would say from best practices and takeaways that I would hope that a lot of these people are taking from this, understand that there's team members like Greg at Mullen Coughlin, Node International, other specialists out there that are going to really support you from the beginning of the process, the IR plan, the business continuity, understanding, again, just the actual understanding of the industry, regulatory, that's probably enough of amount of hours to just speak on for some of these organizations and leadership teams. So really developing that, mapping some of the different frameworks, controls, and then those IT teams, really need to understand and measure some of that actual success, monitor, measure the security. And with us as the actual carriers, we're really looking at tell us more about how you're minimizing your risk, or if you've had a claim like this, tell us what you're doing differently so that we feel confident in working with you going forward. So with that said, I think we've tackled a lot of great topics around ransomware. Again, I want to say thank you to you, Greg, to Mullen Coughlin, to our partnership, and how you're really providing some great insight around these risk factors. So thanks a lot again.
Thank you, Matt. We're happy to support Node, and I think you guys are doing some great things. I think the resources that you've built out for your customers and clients is phenomenal. And I think anyone that is considering taking advantage of those things certainly should at least get a sense or an idea of what's out there as a resource. And whether or not you implement it, that's your decision. But the more that you can do, the more that's available to you. And I know Node's making that very easy to find. Take full advantage of it. And I think everyone will be in a better place.